Good morning to everybody. It's sort of embarrassing to be the first one in the first session, but somebody has to be first. So I'm going to talk to you of a very short and nice result that we have found, and thanks to the funding, particularly of the foundation here and the Science of Philanthropy Initiative, because they've been helping us with that. We just had a minor, little technical problem. So Edward, if you can find the link, and I will open them as you get there. But anyway, so this is joint work with a colleague of ours at VCU that's home, Edward Milner, who's there in the audience with white hair, and he's going to take your questions. And I'm just going to, I have this actually. So I'm just going to move quickly. So I'm going to just give you an idea of what the topic is about. And then I'm just going to go through the experimental design and what we have done and what results we have found. So basically, we are considering two scenarios where we're studying giving, in a sense. We have a giving scenario, and so we have in mind right here a dictator game, and you all are familiar with that, where the dictator, the person making the decision, is given $20, the recipient is given nothing, and the dictator is given a choice to give, some, whatever, so he can give something from 0 to 20. And then we compare that to an equivalent scenario, technically, where we call a taking scenario, where this time the dictator is told that the recipient is given a $20 endowment, he has nothing, and he can take whatever he wants. And basically, we want to know, we really simply ask this question. If I ask a person, in this case, a donor, right now it's a subject in the lab, but we're about to move to go live with more real donors. So in the lab, we ask which scenario of these two they prefer, just as first question. And then the next question that I kept asking a long time ago, I kept bothering Ed, and I could say, I just want to know, so how much they dislike the scenario that they don't like, basically, right? And when I dislike, I really had in mind, back from my day in graduate school, how much are they willing to pay for not being in one situation versus another? So what reduction they're willing to take in their endowment to avoid whatever scenario that they didn't like. And basically, we go with two reasons, in a sense, right? Because first of all, taking, thinking about taking, it feels a little unrealistic, because you think about how often do we see taking? Well, first of all, that is true, that the first little line there, that there are lots of opportunities to taking in society, and it's been studied by notable economists also. But technically, even when there is no punishment, no detection, people don't take as much. So in a sense, we had a little bit behind our mind that maybe people in general don't like to take away from other person. And then there has been recently, study from John, I guess. John was one of the first, actually, with his JPE paper and Bardsley. And then we have, more people coming in, that they actually have introduced the possibility of taking in a dictator game. And they have seen that, taking was not total. So the dictators in general, when the option to take something, John started with the option to take $1 or $5, and then we have expanded, Reber and us, actually, we have expanded to they can take the whole 20, the whole endowment. And they usually don't take, so the taking is not total, it's not complete. So basically, what do we find? This is just giving you the punchline, and then I'll take you through the paper mostly. So we actually find that people are averse to taking, and actually it turns out that was very surprising, that people are willing to forego a substantial amount of their endowment to avoid taking. And so going down to the numbers, we see that 86% of our dictator, they choose the give-only game at the very beginning when I give them a choice between a dictator game, a regular dictator game, or the equivalent where they can take. And it turns out then when I ask how much, so when I measure how much they're willing to give up for not being put in a situation where they have to take, they're almost giving away a third of their endowment. So aversion to taking appears to be quite significant and strong. So then it will bring us to the next question: how can we, use that? How we can use it to our advantage, in a sense. So now I'm going to guide you through the experimental design, and we always try to be the simplest possible because I really love experiments that they're designed and they're very simple to understand and very simple to conduct. So this study is done in 3 phases. So with the phase 1, every subject comes to the lab and they're just given a choice between a dictator. Do you want to play a dictator game where you have 20, or you want to play a dictator game where the other person has 20 and you can take? So now we need to ask ourselves, what do we expect? So we don't want to go into long detail of what I can expect, but I can broadly tell you that if you're selfish, so because then I will see, because of what actually first, the decision that the subject will do, it will tell me, if I believe in preferences, it will tell me that whatever they choose, it means that they prefer that over the other, so they have an aversion for the other. So if you're selfish, selfish means that you are always maximizing your own payoff, so you always keep everything or you take everything. So you should be indifferent between those 2 games, so I shouldn't see a clear direction. Then if I use pure altruistic preferences, meaning what? Well, here I know sometimes the language is slightly different. I mean you care about your own payoff and the payoff of the other person. Again, that shouldn't matter the game because either you can give a certain amount or you can not take an equivalent. So you can always arrange to get similar payoff. If you are in purely altruistic, now there's, again, several definitions here, but basically in purely altruistic, you care about your own payoff, the payoff of the recipient, and then you enjoy this warm glow, thanks to Jim's invention of the term, but you enjoy warm glow from donating. Now, the donating in this context, it could mean the amount that I give, or it could be the amount that I not take. Now, if the warm glow is the same from these 2 actions, then it shouldn't make any difference again. So now, only in the last case where if I don't really know whether the warm glow that you derive from giving is the same as the warm glow that you derive from not taking, so only in this case, I will not know which one you will choose of these 2 games. So I will not, and that's why basically with this, we're really not even testing a theory. We're just trying to understand behavior and try to see how people behave. So that's the first decision that they make. Then we move to phase 2. Now, phase 2, of course, depends on the choice that people did in phase 1. So all those who chose the giving game in phase 1, they're then presented with 10 additional choices. So then we're asking them, basically, again, the same question, except that this time we're asking whether they want to be put in a scenario where they have a $19 endowment and they play a dictator game, or they prefer the taking game where the recipient has $20 endowment. So basically, we keep reducing endowment $1 at a time and keep asking them whether they want to stay, whether they still prefer the giving game over the taking game. And we go down all to 10. And we stop at 10 in the design because we thought in our mind, who knew back then, that nobody would ever take a $10 reduction for not to play the taking game. So knowing now, we probably could have gone longer. Of course, that's the equivalent. If in phase 1 they chose the taking game, then they're asked the following question. So we're asking them, how much reduction in endowment they need to take in the taking game before they want to switch to the giving game. And I guess here is the Z3 page that you see. So, for example, decision 2, actually the language we use says you have $19 and may give some to a charity, or do you prefer option B? Charity has $20 and you may take away some from the charity. So they need to click 1 time on each decision. They have to make a choice for each one of those. Now, it is also true that once they switch, the system will not allow them to switch back. We kind of enforce rational behavior. So basically, what do we do in phase 2? If you want it, if you ask yourself, so if, for example, I click, I prefer 19, 18, and 17, and then at 16, I switch to the other game. So it means to me that I'm willing to give up, $3 for being put in a situation where I play a taking game. So this is my measure of what it's, let me use the language. I'm measuring how much I'm willing to give up of endowment. So it's the equivalent variation in a sense, if you remember your consumer problem where, you change prices and you ask what's reduction in income would put the person at the same, this utility level that they have with the higher prices. That's it, that's what it is. And so again, what are my predictions? Well, if you're selfish, you shouldn't, you should switch immediately. It doesn't really matter which game you're playing. You want your maximum payoff. Again, if you're purely altruistic, or if the warm glow in purely altruistic and your warm glow from giving and not taking is the same, again, you should switch immediately. You shouldn't take a reduction in income. You should just, choose the allocation that you prefer between you and the other person. It's only in the last case, again, if I cannot tell the difference between these two feelings that I have from giving and from not taking, then I may be willing to have a positive, different from zero equivalent variation, because I don't want to be put in the other situation. And then finally, in phase 3, the subject made an allocation on each one of the 11 decisions that they chose before, the first one and the 10. So for example, if they chose 20-0 to play the first game, they chose the regular dictator game, then 19-0, 18-0, and then they switch to 17-0, so they make 3 decisions to pass something and 1 decision to take something. And then the computer randomly draw 1 decision and pays them for all of them. Yeah. So what did we do? We had 121 subjects coming in 5 sessions in our laboratory at VCU. The program was in Z3. We recruited subjects with true software, and we actually pay really close attention, because in other situations we had these subjects are becoming really experienced, so we can have we had 1 session, it wasn't in this case, but 1 session with lots of very selfish people, so they knew what to do. So we're really very careful in recruiting subjects, so they're brand new people. So the subject, on average, they earn $17.05, and this includes their participation fee. And the charities, on average, earn $6.74. Now, in fact, the recipient, let me put a little parenthesis here. The recipient, so the first thing that they did actually before making all these choices, they said that they were paired with the charity of their choice. And they were offered this list that comes from one of Catherine's papers, actually, of these 10 charities. And so the first thing that they had, they choose the charity, and then they move on, and they saw the language. Do you want to play a game where you have $20 and you may give something to charity, or charity has $20 and you may take something? And these were the choices. We eventually replaced the Sierra Club, actually, because I didn't like that. I didn't consider my donation tax deductible. So that's the 10 charities that we have. So, okay, what do we see? So first of all, the majority of our subjects, they all play the regular dictator game, because the one, first of all, they make a decision. They choose it and they make a decision. So that we have, actually, I didn't put those numbers in here, and I want to tell you. We had 104 people who chose the give-only game in phase 1, and 17 that chose the take-only game in phase 1. And then it turns out that 86.7% of dictator, whenever they make an allocation decision in the standard dictator game, they give a positive amount, and they give on average $5.71, which is about 29% of their endowment. So these are a little higher percentages than the regular reported in the literature, but we think that this is just due for the fact that they're paired with actual charities. So that's why. So that's the first thing. So we always want to make sure that whatever we find goes along with what somebody else had found it before. We also find something that we compare the allocation that people made in a regular dictator game, with the dictator having $20 and the recipient 0, and the corresponding taking game where the dictator had 0 and the recipient has $20. We want to make sure that we find allocations that are consistent with what we have found before, actually, in the 2014 paper. And in fact, we see that the recipient fares better. So the recipient ends up with a larger final allocation, a larger payoff, whenever the game is framed as a take-only game. So in fact, on average here, the charities make $9.43 versus $6.21. And what we found in our previous paper, it was $8.36 versus $5.37. So in phase 2, we measured this equivalent variation. So what we find here, which was really, I think it was a big surprise when we were seeing these results. So we see that 72 subjects out of the one that chose the give-only game in phase one, they have a positive equivalent variation, means they're willing to sacrifice, on average, $6.23 for not being asked to choose the taking game. Now, the complement subject, the 17 that chose the take-only game in phase one, now that's a very small number, and 9 of them actually, they're willing to take a reduction of $7.52 for not being put in the giving game. And then we have 40 subjects, which is 33% of our pool of subjects, who actually don't care. So there are 33 from the one that chose the give-only game in phase one, and 8 that chose the take-only game, that they switch immediately. They don't take any reduction in income. They just say, you know, I just want to make a decision over the $20 total. So, you know, this is an histogram of this endowment that it's foregone. And, you know, you can see it's pretty strong, and it's actually quite amazing, I thought. So now let me point out something. 6% of the dictator, no, it's 86. There is an 8 missing. 86% of dictators chose the give-only game in phase one. So that's the first thing, yeah, that's the first thing to say. So that's pretty remarkable. That's a strong majority in favor of that. The second one, which is, we really don't have an explanation for this yet. So we look at the selfish subject. Who is selfish in this scenario? So first of all, you know, always maximize their payoff. So they always take 20 out of any decision. And they don't take a reduction in income, so they switch immediately from whatever game they are. Okay, surprisingly enough, they all chose the give-only game. None chose the take-only game. So I just report the result. And then we took them away from the subsequent analysis. We do not like to keep the selfish people when we study preferences of, you know, altruistic, technically individual. So then in terms of equivalent variation, dictators who chose the give-only option in phase one, they are willing to forego $6.23 of their endowment to avoid taking. So that's a quite remarkable measure. It's about 31% of their endowment. But then more than that, so if you compare what their allocation decision was in the first decision when they played the regular dictator game, and then you compare that decision to the last decision before they switched, and you look at their payoff, it turns out that their payoff is reduced on average by $2.58. So basically, they are reducing their final payoff about 19% to avoid being put in a situation of taking. So they, you know, the 31% versus the 19%. So they tend to shift some of the price for being put in a taking situation to the recipient, so they don't pay the whole cost. So basically, you know, that's the result that I'm presenting to you right here. And so I think the important message that we take away from here is that subjects actually are not indifferent in the way that you ask them their contribution, and they actually certainly show a strong aversion to taking. And before I move to this one, and I still need to remark that though when they're put in a situation of taking away something, they don't take as much. So my recipient ends up with a larger amount of money. So that goes to my webpage that they're not working there. So I'll have it on eventually. They will have it on online, hopefully. So what are the implications for philanthropy? And this is where our, you know, that's what we just started to do. We're working with this My Plan G company that is an online fundraising company that basically does two major things. One is to organizes your contribution. So if you decide to run a marathon and you need to coordinate all your donors, they run the thing online for you. If you are a millionaire and you need to, you wish to, you know, to give all these donations, so you make them responsible, you give them the list and the percentages, and then they give you just one receipt at the end of the year, and they charge a minimal fee for that. So they have agreed to work with us, and they've been very receptive because we told them that these two conflicting things. So, and this click here for the giving frame and click here for the taking frame. So the idea that we're proposing is, 1 minute, goodness gracious. So we want to have a website where you're going there, you want to make your contribution to JUT's running marathon, and my frame is simply, you know, increase your donation and you put your number that you want, so you increase by 100. The taking frame, on the other hand, is a decrease. So you are on this frame, and immediately says that the donation, you're donating 500, and then you say, unless you decrease by, and you can go down to 100 if that was your level. So the message here would be that we expect that we would decrease less, so he ends up with more than 100. However, the result that I just presented to you, that people are so averse to taking, so we're afraid, and that's why we need to check. In the lab, the subject couldn't leave, so they stayed, they played the game, and he ended up with more money in the taking scenario. So when we tested those two websites, in real life, will they get annoyed because I'm asking them to reduce donation and it's confusing, and we will probably have to ask them, make sure this is really your donation that you wanted? And that level, so there's plenty of you presenting papers about suggested contribution. Where do I start from? To my plan G, we told them we're going to start, 1 standard deviation, 2 standard deviation about the median and whatever. So, but that number will, of course, we will have to look at your old results about that. So that needs to be checked. But the truth is, if I can, if the first one, so that the recipient ends up with a higher level of donation when I frame my donation as taking, that's worth exploring. So if they don't leave, that would be hopefully good. And I think that's basically it. Yeah, that's why, just in case you don't remember, 86% chose the first one, so that, that was really strong. I think my time is over. Thank you very much.
So we have time for a couple questions.
Yeah.
So the population that you were doing your studies with, were those students or?
These are just students. So yes, and the student in the lab, and actually we have now 2 studies in a sense, because we have the regular experiment that I presented you, and these donations, this website. We just took the website from the online company and we presented to the student with just one charity there. Actually, no, they could choose their charity and then go down or go up. And yes, so in the lab, the student ends up with a higher contribution. The charity ends up with a higher contribution in the taking game. So now we're about to go live, IRB permitting. I'm still fighting little adjustment. Yeah.
I think it's a really interesting result, but I was wondering how much could be explained by just experimental demand effect, because you just asked them how much would you be willing to pay for avoiding the taking game. You don't ask them how much would you be willing to avoid the giving game. I mean, it's...
Oh no, both, right? Depending on what you choose. So if you choose giving, then you ask them whether you want to switch to taking. If you choose taking, you ask them whether you want to switch to giving. So, yeah, so it's contingent to your first choice. And actually, we also, how in that we said so we switched the order of the giving and the taking in decision 1, just because, the left mode sometimes could just poison your bias, your choices, so we switched it around and it didn't make any difference.
Hi, Laura. We should actually start to use, is this on? Can you hear this?
Yeah.
We should start to use this so we can make sure it's on the webcast as well. So I think this is fantastic. And I'm with you. I was thinking early on about your last slide, where can we take this as a general preference and think about how it might manifest itself in the field with suggested donation amounts. So it feels to me as though your next step is to link these laboratory experiments to laboratory experiments that have bins or suggested amounts and see if you find similar results. And then the next step after that would be to take that reasoning to the field in much the same way that, so James Edwards and I just published this paper on suggested donation amounts, and we see that if a person in the counterfactual world would give $200, but we ask her to give 100, many times she goes down and gives 100.
Yep.
The person who was going to give 50, if we ask them to give 100, a lot of times they just don't give at all.
Yeah.
So this type of reasoning, I think, can really help enrich our models if this is a sort of a really strong behavioral insight that will eventually get us to something that all the practitioners are really interested in. How do we bin people? Not only bin in the ask, but actually been in the give. So tomorrow we'll be at the greatest university in the world, and we're going to walk in and we're going to see names on plaques that say, this guy's $1 million giver, this woman is a $10 million giver. Actually, how to set up those bins as well.
Okay, so one more thing, yes, the suggested amount is going to be very important, but those two websites that I couldn't show you, it really has, your donation is 0, plus, and you add whatever you want, that's my give frame, or your donation is, say, 500, minus what you want to take away. So it's visible in a website because it's interactive. In a card campaign, you only check your bin. So we believe that there is this suggested donation component, which we're not, we haven't studied that, but we're strongly in favor of the fact that when they have to reduce the contribution, they will reduce less, that for sure, than what they are going up by giving.
Now, I want to be clear. I don't want to take any novelty for the suggested stuff.
No.
Bill Harbaugh has a great paper a long time ago, and other experimentalists do too, but I think I've
No,
pulled
no,
a
but
Nick
absolutely, we
Epley.
need
When I
to.
think, I always think about my own studies, so I'm guilty of what Nick was describing. So I'll give the microphone now to the next person who wants to ask a question.
Hi. I'm not convinced this actually is saying much about suggested donation amounts, because the framing as a taking is very much it's mine, don't take it away. And it's property rights and other things like that. And that's not captured by them asking for more than you're willing to give. Well, let me finish my comment. Yeah. No, I understand your point. I just want to finish. The problem with this experiment, as I see it, and maybe you have a great answer I haven't seen, is that it's hard to know whether it's an endowment effect or taking aversion or a combination of the two.
Yes, we are a little bit aware of that. So we have a future experiment planning exactly for where this $20, right now it's on paper, this charity has 20. So now
Right, you
we
have
need
to
to
give
move
them the
to
20
where
and
they're
then-
really in her desk or in my desk. Yeah, we have been talking about that.
Okay.
So yeah, we're aware of that. But the suggested donation, the number that I put from where they go down or the number that I have to put to where they go up, because the two treatment needs to be comparable, it is suggesting something.
Oh, absolutely, it's
so-
suggesting something. The question
And
is
so
whether...
Edward keeps saying that if it's too high, people will maybe leaving the page, one, because it's too high, two, because they have to subtract numbers from there, so it's confusing and they get annoyed.
Yeah, and it can also be an identity effect where if it's high, they say, oh, that's for people not like me.
Yeah, true. We're done?
Okay, we have time for one quick question, and then you can always talk to the speaker after the session.
Can I? Thank you. Very interesting.
Yeah, it's working.
Yeah. So very interesting research. But could you go back to the choice of a charity slide? Because you had the subjects choose the charities before you had them to decide the amount to give or not to take.
Yeah.
And
No, before making
Yeah.
the first decision. Yeah.
so that question would be, should I give to that particular charity, or should I choose not to take from that particular charity? I may feel like I want to give to that charity, but I don't feel like to be a recipient of that charity. So it's different questions.
You mean you don't want to take from that charity eventually? Well, yeah, we that's how we structure. So we said you're going to be paired with the charity of your choice. The first thing that they do is choose the charity, and then
Yeah.
we make them choose.
But the type of charity is not the same type of charities across the board. You have different types. You have charities to support the basic needs.
No, but you choose one, and then you're
Yeah.
stuck with that one.
Yes, but like donors. So the question is the donor motivations, and if I want to be a donor or if I want to be a receiver in that case.
Oh no, you're not being a receiver ever. You're always in charge.
But I choose not to take, right? Like if a charity give to me, I choose not to take from that charity. That's
No. The choice that you make. Okay, so that wasn't clear. You're told that the charity has $20 and you can take anything. So the instructions tell them that if whatever you don't take, the next thing that's going to happen, I'm going to make the donation online to the charity, so the charity keeps that money.
Okay.
And that's what what happened in front of them.
One last question. Do you have the statistic for the allocation of charities across different charities?
we have the results, and we haven't checked on that. So you want to
Okay.
know what they chose between, the majority actually, they choose the A, the American Cancer Society and the American Red Cross. But, yeah.
Okay.
But,
All right.
okay, thank you.
Thank you very much.